The third time I came home to find a silver Mercedes blocking my driveway, I knew I had a serious problem on my hands. My name's Alex and I've been living in my house on Maple Street for 8 years. In all that time, I'd never had an issue with neighbors parking in my driveway, until Karen Williams moved in next door 3 months ago. I was pulling up to my house after a long day at work when I saw her car sitting right there in my driveway like she owned the place. Not partially blocking it, not hanging over a little bit, completely parked in my driveway, taking up the entire space meant for my car. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at this woman's audacity. The first time it happened 2 weeks ago, I figured it was an honest mistake. New neighbor, maybe she got confused about property lines. The second time last week, I thought maybe she had an emergency or something. But this was just plain disrespectful. I walked over and knocked on her front door. After about 5 minutes, Karen finally answered, a woman in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of expression that suggested she was perpetually annoyed about something. "Excuse me," I said as politely as I could manage, "but you're parked in my driveway again. Could you please move your car?" Karen looked at me like I'd just asked her to donate a kidney. "Oh, that's your driveway? I thought it was just extra street parking." Now, let me describe my driveway so you understand how ridiculous this was. It's a clear concrete pad that extends about 20 feet from my garage to the street, with obvious curb cuts and everything. There's no way anyone could mistake it for street parking unless they were completely clueless or just didn't care. "No, it's definitely my driveway," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "It connects directly to my garage." Karen sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Well, I suppose I can move it, but I don't understand why you can't just park on the street. There's plenty of room." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Because it's my driveway. I paid for it. It's part of my property." "Fine, whatever," she said, grabbing her keys with the attitude of someone doing me a huge favor. "But I hope you know that good neighbors are supposed to help each other out." "Help each other out? By letting her steal my parking space?" I watched her move her car to the street, shaking my head in disbelief. I figured that would be the end of it. After all, I'd made it clear that the driveway was mine and she'd acknowledged it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I came home to find her Mercedes back in my driveway. This time, she'd even locked the car and gone inside, like she was planning to leave it there indefinitely. I knocked on her door again, but she didn't answer even though I could see lights on inside and hear her TV. I ended up having to park 3 blocks away and walk home because all the street parking near my house was taken. By the time I got inside, I was furious. But I'm not the type to escalate conflicts unnecessarily, so I decided to leave a polite note on her windshield explaining the situation and asking her to please not park there again. The next morning, I found my note crumpled up and thrown on my front lawn. Her car was gone, but the message was clear: she didn't care about my polite requests. That's when I started paying attention to Karen's routine and realized this wasn't just inconsiderate behavior, it was a pattern of entitlement that extended far beyond my driveway. Karen worked from home as some kind of online consultant, which meant she was around most of the day to observe and comment on everything happening in the neighborhood. She had opinions about everyone's lawn care, trash can placement, and decorating choices, which she shared freely whether anyone asked or not. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly lady on the other side of Karen, told me that Karen had already complained to her about the bird feeders in her backyard, claiming they were attracting vermin and lowering property values. She'd also lectured the Johnson family about their kids' bikes being left in their own front yard. But the driveway situation was personal and it was escalating. The 4th time I found her car in my driveway, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of knocking on her door, I called the non-emergency police line to ask about having the car towed from my private property. The officer who responded was sympathetic but explained that since this was a civil matter between neighbors, they couldn't just tow the car without going through a formal process. He was willing to talk to Karen about it though. When Officer Martinez knocked on Karen's door, she came out with this sweet, innocent act that was completely different from the attitude she'd shown me. "Oh, officer, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was such a big deal. My new neighbor seems very upset about sharing a little parking space." "Sharing? Sharing? Ma'am," Officer Martinez explained patiently, "this isn't a shared space. This is his private driveway on his private property. You don't have any right to park here." Karen nodded and smiled like she was listening carefully. "Of course, officer. I completely understand. It won't happen again." Officer Martinez turned to me. "Sir, she's agreed to move the car and not park here again. If it happens again, document it and call us. After multiple warnings, we can pursue towing or citations." I thanked the officer and watched Karen move her car with this martyred expression, like she was the victim in this situation. As soon as Officer Martinez left, she shot me a look that could have melted steel. "I hope you're happy," she said coldly. "Calling the police over a parking spot. Some neighbor you are." I was speechless. She was the one parking in my driveway, but somehow I was the bad neighbor for not letting her get away with it? That night, I thought the police visit would finally end this nonsense. I was wrong again. Karen kept parking in my driveway, but now she was smarter about it. She'd move her car before I got home from work, but parked there during the day when I was gone. I only found out because Mrs. Peterson mentioned seeing the Mercedes in my driveway while I was at work. I started taking pictures with timestamps to document the pattern. Sure enough, Karen was using my driveway as her personal parking space during business hours, then moving her car before I got home to avoid another confrontation. The final straw came on a Saturday morning when I had planned to wash my car in the driveway. I came outside with my bucket and hose to find Karen's Mercedes sitting there again, and this time she was sitting in the driver's seat talking on her phone like it was her personal office. I walked over and tapped on her window. She looked up with this annoyed expression and rolled the window down a crack. "Yes?" she said like I was interrupting something important. "Karen, you're in my driveway again. I need you to move so I can use my own property." "I'm in the middle of an important business call," she replied, turning back to her phone. "I'll move when I'm finished." That's when I realized that being polite and reasonable wasn't going to work with this woman. She wasn't making honest mistakes or having temporary lapses in judgment. She was deliberately taking advantage of my property because she thought I wouldn't do anything about it. I went inside and started researching solutions. That's when I discovered boom barriers, those automatic gates they use in parking garages and gated communities. You could actually buy residential versions that were specifically designed for driveways. The more I researched, the more perfect this solution seemed. A boom barrier would physically prevent anyone from parking in my driveway without my permission. It was a clear, visible boundary that even Karen couldn't pretend to misunderstand. I found a company called Secure Drive Systems that specialized in residential boom barriers. The basic model cost about $1,200 installed, which seemed like a reasonable investment to solve this problem permanently. When the sales rep, Mike, came out to give me a quote, he took one look at my situation and started grinning. "Let me guess, neighbor parking problem? How did you know?" "Brother, you'd be amazed how often we get calls like this. People think they can just take whatever they want until you put up a physical barrier. Then suddenly they understand property lines." Mike explained that the boom barrier would be controlled by a remote, just like a garage door opener. I could raise and lower it whenever I wanted, and it would automatically close after a set time delay. It was also smart enough to detect if a car was underneath it so it wouldn't come down on a vehicle. "The best part," Mike said, "is that it's completely legal. This is your private property, and you have every right to control access to it. Your neighbor can complain all she wants, but there's nothing she can do about it." I signed the contract that afternoon. The installation took 2 days. Mike and his crew dug a shallow trench across the width of my driveway to run the electrical lines, then installed the boom barrier mechanism and the control post. The barrier itself was a bright yellow and black striped arm that would be impossible to miss. I have to admit, watching it go up and down for the first time was incredibly satisfying. The mechanism was quiet but decisive, no doubt about when the driveway was open or closed. Karen watched the entire installation process from her front window, and I could practically see the steam coming out of her ears. But she didn't come over to say anything, which was probably wise given how angry she looked. The moment of truth came the following Monday morning. I was working from home and happened to be looking out my window when Karen's Mercedes came cruising down the street. She slowed down as she approached my driveway, probably planning her usual move, and then stopped completely when she saw the boom barrier. I watched her sit in her car for about 5 minutes, staring at the barrier like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then she got out of her car and walked over to examine it more closely. The barrier was down, blocking access to my driveway, with a clear sign that read, "Private property, authorized vehicles only." Karen walked around it, probably looking for some way to defeat it or drive around it, but the installation was professional and thorough. Finally, she marched up to my front door and started pounding on it like the house was on fire. Alex, open this door right now." I took my time answering, mainly because I was curious to see how she'd try to spin this situation. When I opened the door, Karen was practically vibrating with rage. "What is that thing?" she demanded, pointing at the boom barrier. "It's a boom barrier," I replied calmly. "It controls access to my driveway. You can't just block off part of the street." "I'm not blocking the street, Karen. I'm blocking my driveway." You know, the private property you keep parking on without permission. This is ridiculous. What if I have an emergency and need to park there? I had to pause and think about that one. Karen, in what emergency would you need to park in my driveway instead of your own? Well, what if my driveway is blocked? Then you can park on the street like everyone else. The street parking is inconvenient. And my driveway is convenient, but it's not yours to use. Karen was getting more frustrated by the minute. This is harassment. You're doing this just to spite me. No, Karen, I'm doing this because you keep parking in my driveway despite being asked repeatedly to stop. The boom barrier solves the problem. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Officer Martinez already confirmed that this is my private property and I have the right to control access to it. Karen stormed off, but I could tell this wasn't over. She was the type of person who couldn't stand being told no, especially by someone she considered beneath her. Sure enough, within an hour I had a visit from Officer Martinez. But instead of looking stern or annoyed, he was trying not to smile. Sir, I got a call about a dangerous traffic obstruction at this address. I'm assuming this is about your new boom barrier. That would be my guess, officer. Is there a problem with it? Officer Martinez walked over to examine the installation. Nope, no problem at all. It's clearly on your private property, it's not blocking the street or sidewalk, and it's properly marked. You have every right to control access to your own driveway. So Karen can't do anything about it? Not a thing. She can complain all she wants, but you're not violating any laws or ordinances. Nice solution, by the way. We see a lot of neighbor disputes over parking and most of them drag on for months. This cuts right to the heart of the problem. After Officer Martinez left, I watched Karen pacing around her front yard like a caged animal. She kept staring at the boom barrier with this expression of pure frustration, probably trying to figure out some way to defeat it. That afternoon she tried a different approach. Instead of confrontation, she came over with a plate of cookies and a fake smile. Alex, I brought you some cookies as a peace offering. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I accepted the cookies but remained cautious. That's thoughtful of you, Karen. I was thinking, maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement about the driveway. You know, neighbors helping neighbors. There it was again, her twisted idea that being a good neighbor meant giving her whatever she wanted. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind? I asked, curious to hear her proposal. Well, maybe I could use the driveway sometimes when you're not home, and in exchange I could help you with yard work or something. I almost laughed out loud. Karen, I don't need help with yard work. And I don't need someone parking in my driveway when I'm not home. That's what the boom barrier is for. Her fake smile started to crack. But surely you can see how inconvenient this is for me. The street parking is so far from my front door. Your own driveway isn't far from your front door. Sometimes I have guests who need to park somewhere. They can park in your driveway or on the street. Karen's mask was completely gone now. You're being incredibly selfish about this. What happened to community spirit? Karen, community spirit doesn't mean letting people take your stuff because they want it. It means respecting each other's property and boundaries. She left without another word, taking her cookies with her. The next few days were blissfully peaceful. I could come and go from my house without worrying about finding someone else's car in my driveway. The boom barrier worked exactly as advertised, quick and convenient for me, impossible for anyone else. But Karen wasn't giving up that easily. I started noticing her lingering near my driveway at different times of day, probably trying to figure out the pattern of when I opened and closed the barrier. She was also making a point of parking her Mercedes as close to my driveway entrance as possible without actually blocking it, which forced me to be more careful when backing out. Then she escalated to passive-aggressive tactics. She started leaving her trash cans positioned so they partially blocked my view when backing out of the driveway. She planted flowers right up to the property line that hung over into my space. She even started playing music loudly in her backyard during the day, apparently hoping to annoy me into negotiations. None of it worked. The boom barrier was solving the original problem perfectly, and her petty retaliation just made it more obvious who the unreasonable neighbor was. The final confrontation came about 3 weeks after the boom barrier installation. I was coming home from the grocery store when I found Karen standing in front of the barrier with a pair of bolt cutters, apparently trying to figure out how to disable it. I parked on the street and walked over to where she was standing. Karen, what are you doing? She spun around, startled, and tried to hide the bolt cutters behind her back. Oh, I thought maybe the barrier was broken and I could help fix it. By cutting it with bolt cutters? Well, I thought maybe something was stuck. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Karen, this is vandalism and attempted destruction of property. I'm documenting this. Her face went red. You can't prove I was going to cut anything. I can prove you're standing on my property with bolt cutters, examining my boom barrier without permission. Most people would call that suspicious behavior. This is harassment, she shouted, apparently her go-to accusation when things didn't go her way. No, Karen, harassment is what you've been doing for months. Parking in my driveway, ignoring police warnings, trying to damage my property, that's harassment. A few neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about. Mrs. Peterson was shaking her head in disapproval, clearly directed at Karen. The Johnsons were watching from their front yard with expressions of disbelief. Karen realized she had an audience and tried to save face. This man has been completely unreasonable about sharing neighborhood resources. I was just trying to help resolve the situation. Mr. Johnson, who'd apparently heard enough, spoke up. Lady, that's his driveway. You don't get to share someone else's driveway just because you want to. Exactly, agreed Mrs. Peterson. I've been watching this nonsense for weeks. The man has been more than patient with you. Karen looked around at the neighbors, realizing that no one was buying her victim act. Without another word, she stormed back to her house, still carrying the bolt cutters. I called Officer Martinez to report the incident. He came out, took my statement and photos and went to talk to Karen. When he came back, he was shaking his head. Sir, I've given her a formal warning about attempted vandalism and trespassing. I also explained that if she continues to harass you over this driveway situation, she could face charges for stalking or harassment. Do you think that'll be the end of it? With people like her, it's hard to say. But she knows now that we're taking this seriously and that she doesn't have any legal standing. Most people back down at that point. Officer Martinez was right. After the bolt cutter incident, Karen's harassment campaign fizzled out. She still shot me dirty looks whenever we crossed paths and she still parked as close to my driveway as possible, but she stopped trying to actually use or damage my property. 6 months later, Karen put her house up for sale. Mrs. Peterson told me that Karen had complained to anyone who would listen about living next to an unreasonable neighbor who wouldn't share his driveway. Apparently, she decided that moving was easier than accepting that other people had property rights. The new neighbors who moved in were a young couple with 2 small kids. When they introduced themselves, I mentioned the boom barrier and explained why it was there. They thought the whole story was hilarious and assured me they had no interest in parking in anyone else's driveway. We actually think it's kind of cool, the husband said. Like having your own private gate. Very high-tech. The boom barrier is still there and it still works perfectly. I barely think about it anymore, it's just part of my routine now. Click the remote as I leave, click it again when I come home. Simple and effective. Looking back, I'm glad Karen forced me to install it. Not just because it solved the parking problem, but because it taught me something important about dealing with unreasonable people. Sometimes being polite and accommodating just enables bad behavior. Sometimes you need to set clear, physical boundaries and enforce them consistently. Karen thought she could wear me down through persistence and emotional manipulation. She was used to people giving in to avoid conflict. But the boom barrier eliminated the possibility of compromise. Either you had permission to use my driveway or you didn't. There was no gray area for her to exploit. The best part is that it protected future neighbors too. Karen couldn't pull the same stunt with whoever moved into my house if I ever decided to sell. The boundary was established and enforceable. I still get a little satisfaction every time I see that yellow and black striped arm come down, blocking access to my driveway. It's a physical reminder that some problems have simple, technological solutions, and that sometimes the best way to deal with a Karen is to remove her ability to be a Karen in the first place. These days, my driveway is peaceful. I can park in my own space without drama, my neighbors respect property boundaries, and I've got a great conversation starter whenever people notice the boom barrier. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you a bad neighbor. It makes you a neighbor with clearly defined boundaries who won't be pushed around. And sometimes that's exactly what the neighborhood needs.